Hi, everybody. I'm a real alcoholic of the hopeless variety. My name's Harmon. Hey, good to see the diehards are holding on hard here. I like that, and I like that, and I like that. So, like Bill said in the 12 and 12 in about step 6, separates the men from the boys and the girls from the ladies, and I can appreciate you guys being here from the bottom of my heart, because if you're not, then I'm not, and that's not a good thing. So anyhow, we like to start in the usual manner, and what we mean by that is we go to the quiet place before we pray the serenity prayer from our heart instead of saying it from our head, please. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. We are talking about our book, Language of the Heart, which has a whole lot of stuff in there, and the part that we're focusing on has been the 12 traditions. Thank you. The stuff that he wrote on the traditions, as much as we can get in. We got a schedule, by the way, if anybody needs it. We are going to be here every Wednesday, Lord willing, except for the 22nd, which is Thanksgiving Eve, which would be 2 weeks from tonight. Is that correct? Is that how we're rolling? Okay, good guess. So we won't be here in 2 weeks, but we're rolling along as far as the time goes. We are already on tradition 9, and we like to read a couple things that Bill has written regarding the traditions, and let's see what we could find out. Actually, how about if we read from the guy who wrote the preamble. A lot of people think Bill did that, but he did not. This guy named Tom did in 1949, and it goes as this. AA's 12 traditions, a pattern of a practical experience. The traditions are the essence of the experience of the groups and the movement. They were written by Bill in an attempt to distill and condense into usable form the knowledge that the groups and the individual members have accumulated. Their traditions are a pattern of practical experience, a guide that will spare many other headaches. And obviously, Bill said, we need a statement of principles, some form of code of traditions, a genuine need for some great unifying, overreaching set of truths that could apply to all groups all the time, serve them in growth, just like the steps do for the individual. And we established if we're not governed by God, we will be ruled by a tyrant. And there's a couple of them, tyrant alcohol and tyrant self or tyrant ego. Bill found out in unity there's strength. Without unity, we are victims. AA, stay whole or we die. And obviously, Bill said, AA is no success story in the ordinary sense of the word. It's a story of suffering transmuted under grace into spiritual progress. And we find out the 12 traditions work not because we are better people, but because we are weaker people. And obviously, Bill coined these as a design of construction for survival. And he said that we are brothers in defects rather than brothers in virtue. And we are a communion of sinners, not saints. And he joked about it. He said the traditions made AA even safe from himself. And lo and behold, he tried to give stepping stones to us 3 times. And he wrote the damn things, and we had to keep turning them down. Anyhow, Bill said implicit through the 12 traditions is a confession that our fellowship has its sins. We admit that we have character defects as a society, and these defects threaten us continually. And as my friend in the back talks, AA works in spite of us, not because of us. And speaking of which, Bob is gracious enough to come up and record this. Please see him for arrangements if you would be so kind to do that. The church asked us to stay down in this area other than the restrooms and the drinking fountain. If you're going to smoke, please go outside by the butt receptacle and make sure that we get them in there. One last thing before we go ahead and get started. It jumped out in me in preparation for this week is some numbers that I found absolutely fascinating. And that is number one that we will talk about, fascinating. The word we, us, and ours, and there's 18 times it's used in the first foreword, 10 times in the second foreword, 0 times in the third foreword, and really no times in the fourth foreword. It's a quote out of the textbook. So it's absolutely amazing how we've gone from 18 in 39 to 10 in 1955 to 0 in 76 and 0 in 2001. And also, too, the we, us, ours in the steps, there's 15 of them. Not a single me, my, or I. In the tradition's short form, there's 11 we, us, ours, not a single me, my, or I. In the tradition's long form, there's 36 we, us, or ours. So you can see that obviously this thing called Alcoholics Anonymous is not a place for me, my, or I. Last but not least, we'll go ahead and read what Bill wrote in 1947, December. He says, our whole AA program is securely founded on the principle of humility. That is to say, the perspective that we relate ourselves rightly to God and our fellows. And we talked about the word humility being cut down to the right size with ourselves, with our fellow man, and Almighty God. And these three pertinent ideas haven't changed in all of the 12 traditions. Unity, primary purpose, responsibility through humility and sacrifice. The relations, we talked about how that's what Bill really talked about, these traditions, what they were. And relationships, healthy relationships begin at home. If I'm not healthy with myself or right with me, I will not be with my group. Chances are the group won't be with Alcoholics Anonymous as a whole, and it'll spread, and Alcoholics Anonymous as a whole won't be right with the world. So the relations is powerful. And obviously, you talk about the AA group of AAs, difference between AA meeting and meeting of AAs, and this special purpose group. I was talking to Russ earlier before it started. Obviously, Tradition 1 states the solution, unity. United we stand, divided we fall. And he talked about substantial unity, essential unity, powerful unity, perfect unity, wonderful unity, and guess what? And he's going to add one to it tonight. And it's so cool to see that. Now, what we've established, and we read this last week, is about, he coined this the language of the heart, and it goes as follows. Why at this particular point in history has God chosen to communicate his healing grace to many of us? Every aspect of this global unfoldment can be related to a single crucial word. That word is communication. There has been life-saving communication among ourselves and the world around us with God. From the beginning, communication in AA has been no ordinary transmission of helpful ideas and attitudes because of our kinship in suffering and because of our common means of deliverance are effective for ourselves when only constantly carried to others. Our channels of contact have always been charged with the language of the heart. And also the seventh tradition, thinking about this, is going around, and if we're any delinquent book borrowers or whatever you call it, kleptos or whatever you're doing, if you are making time payments, Cheryl, how are we doing on that? We're okay for today. Yeah, hopefully we'll have something left over so we can pay to the church so we can come back someday. Okay. I'll get with you after the meeting. Thanks for reminding me on that. So, with that being said, as promised, had the offer for questions, and actually we had 3 good questions. So we're going to go ahead and do this now because tonight's a short night, and I will go ahead and read these questions, and hopefully we will address them. Question number 1, and it said, more to come. And the question is, are there any traditions directly or indirectly violated when AA groups have or allow, for example, addicts only, powerless people, only chair AA meetings, do the readings, make comments, bring topics, and be home group members? Well, the answer is yes, as what we're saying as far as maybe violating. Some people might be offensive with that, but they certainly contradict with the traditions and are conference approved. Obviously, you cannot be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous according to this group if you are anything other than alcoholic. So the answer to that question is it definitely conflicts with our first tradition, because if you have those kind of people in the meetings, then that would not promote tradition one or unity. Certainly that would be a definite what we're talking about in tradition 3 as far as what membership's problems other than alcohol. And certainly that would affect AA as a whole, tradition number 4. And it certainly would dissect tradition 5, primary purpose. Once you talk about anything other than alcohol, you've divided that. It would be in conflict with tradition 6, because what you're doing is you are endorsing another cause other than Alcoholics Anonymous. And certainly it would be jumping all over tradition 10, which will be next week with the outside issues. So, as these traditions are interrelated, when we have a conflict with one, as you can see, you will have a conflict with most of the other ones. Thank you for the question, whoever the questioner is. I know that. You know what? The questionnaire, I tell you what, I can read. There's beautiful handwriting or printing on that. And there's some very, if you'll look at this, it looks like some Christmas ornaments and so on and so forth. So there's another question here. I don't know which came first or second, but we'll go with this on tradition number 7. How can we as AA groups be fully self-supporting through our own contribution when we accept monies from non-AA members? The answer is obviously we can't be fully self-supporting if we accept money from others than AA. Maybe a way to address that in your group would be we have blue cards, we have yellow cards, maybe we need to get a different color card, or in your group explain what this pamphlet says in a general way, that if you are not a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, we ask that you don't participate in any way, shape, or form, including our 7th step, our 7th tradition, self-supporting. I believe that would be the only way that you could address it. Most members, unfortunately, probably don't realize that, and that would be a good way to maybe inform them, and or probably non-members that are putting money in the basket are doing out of the kindness of the heart to cover their expenses and so on and so forth. The history of that 7th tradition obviously was not so much worried if you had a non-member or family members, they were coming in, they were more concerned with like foundations or businesses or people really getting into Alcoholics Anonymous and making big donations and telling AA what to do. But that wasn't the question that they asked on there. So I believe, obviously, with that, that would be the only way to address that, so everybody knows what we should and shouldn't be doing according to our own conference-approved literature. Now, that would being said on that is what we talk about in that other study that we do from January till May. We aren't reformed alcoholics, we're informed. A lot of people don't have that information, therefore ignorance is not a character defects. You don't know if you don't know, if you haven't been exposed, or you don't know that. So that would be our job, to inform each other in a loving, kind way. Last question would be, are there any traditions being violated when an AA group has written in their format stating, we are here to talk about alcohol and drugs? It would be certainly a most confliction with a lot of our traditions. Obviously, it would be tradition 1, because if you did that, you would be, it would not be unity that we're talking about, because when you bring alcohol and anything in, you've just divided Alcoholics Anonymous with, it's like throwing a hand grenade in there, and that's definitely not good for our unity. Number 2, certainly, why would you be talking about drugs when you are in this, and you're tradition 3, the only way you can be an AA member is to be an alcoholic. Certainly that would be in conflict with tradition 4 because your group would be affecting Alcoholics Anonymous as a whole. And what I mean by that is if you had somebody randomly come to your group and you read that and he was an alcoholic, and you read that and talked about that at your group, he or she may be done forever for good, and I talked about that. Certainly that would divert us from tradition 5, our primary purpose. You would have multiple purposes going on when you're talking about alcohol and whatever. Certainly that would be in conflict with tradition 6 because we would be actually endorsing another cause, and that would be recovery from whatever else you're talking about. In this one, you're talking about drugs, and certainly that would be in violation, or if you would, conflict with tradition 10, because that is an outside issue. So thank you for these questions. They were well thought out, and as all things go, I was absolutely fascinated, if you will, how one of these things are brought up, how many traditions we actually are in conflict with. You call it violation, give them a ticket, give them whatever you're going to do or whatever, arrest them or whatever. But here's the deal with it, with these questions, and obviously we all are, if you go to enough meetings, you're going to see that. And our job is to educate and, of course, follow them as well. So if we have any more questions, I ask that you would put them on a card like this or a paper like that and leave behind, and then if it would be so kind, I will get in another week or so, because I would like to give these questions the time and attention that they surely deserve. And yeah, well thought out, and I appreciate the opportunity to hopefully address these things and make an explanation as what we've been talking about. So, with that being said, we'll move on to where we always go, and that is the short form and the long form of the traditions, and this one is ginormously different, the short form versus the large, or the long. The short form of tradition 9 is this: AA as such ought never, the N word, be organized. But we may create service boards or committees directly responsible to those that they serve. I'm going to go ahead and stop there. That tradition, along with the third tradition, well, we twist that and use that as a cop-out for not being responsible. When we say AA ought not be organized, that doesn't give you the autonomy, if you are making coffee at a group, to turn the coffee on at 5 minutes before the meeting starts. That does not give you the autonomy if you are supposed to be setting up an 8 o'clock meeting and you don't get there till 7:59. That does not give you the autonomy to just free-for-all as you see fit. That's one of the biggest cop-outs, and I'll tell you the danger of that, and it's happened to me more than once. The group will remain unnamed, but it's here in Summit County. And I went there, and it was 7:45. I was running late. I always try to get at least a half hour before and an hour sometimes before. I thought the meeting had closed, and it didn't make it to the lead sheets that it had disbanded and or was not taken out of the group. And I was appalled when I got there. There was nobody there. So, now, is that tradition 9, or is that just being, you want to do what you want to do when you want to do it and how you do it? The point I'm trying to make, if that would have been my first meeting and you guys weren't there, I would have said, screw you guys. I knew this deal wasn't, look at this. They told me to come here. I wanted some help, and they ain't even going to be there. Or, if I came to the birthplace of Alcoholics Anonymous in Akron, Ohio, and saw that kind of crap, I just call it what it is, and that kind of crap that's going on in there, don't give me this AA not to be organized. That is not the same thing as being neglectful or being irresponsible. Thank you for my 30 seconds on the podium, but I had to say what I had to say. So, right? Yeah, somebody said, I get some stitches, he's bleeding out up there. The bleeding, yeah, I know. So, but you know what? I take that and I mean that. And this is just one last editorial about this. If you have the honor and privilege of being asked to be a servant for Alcoholics Anonymous, take it for what it is. Take it for what it is that you are being used. God's calling you. And if you are going to do the deal, you made that decision in the third step, you better do it. Say what you do what you say, and be responsible to Alcoholics Anonymous, to that group, to your commitment, to your word, and most importantly, to Almighty God, and most important of all, that new man or woman walking in the door. So Tradition 9 about the not be organized, that's not what they mean. Here's what they mean, Tradition 9. Thank you for that. I feel that was very therapeutic for me. Thank you. Listen to what 9 says. Each AA group needs the least possible organization. But like I said, it still needs some, not an excuse for irresponsibility. And here's what we find out with that. Rotating leadership. Stop right there. Leadership is not a bad word in Alcoholics Anonymous. A lot of people think that is a bad word. Do yourself a favor, read the service manual, our third legacy, what Bill talks about leadership, and I guarantee you, your mind will be opened up and you will have a different attitude about the word leadership and what it is and what it is not. It's spelled out specifically. Anyhow, it goes on, rotating leadership is the best. The small group, elect its secretary. The large group, its rotating committee. And the groups of a large metropolitan area, their central committee or their central or intergroup committee, which often employs full-time secretary. Oh, so I get it. So Tradition 9 ensures Tradition 8, which we did last week. See how they're all interrelated? In other words, we can't have one without another. It's absolutely impossible to talk about one tradition because the other ones are in there. And remember what 8 ensures Step 12 and everything that we've been talking about, but it gets better. It goes on to say this. The trustees of the General Service Board are, in effect, our AA General Service Committee. You might want to write that down, okay? They are the custodians of our AA tradition and the receivers of AA's contributions by which we maintain our General Service Office in New York. They are authorized by the groups to handle our overall public relations, and they guarantee the integrity of our principal newspaper, The Grapevine. All such representatives are to be guided in the spirit of service. So obviously, for true leaders in AA are but trusted and experienced servants of the whole. They derive no real authority from their titles. They do not govern. Universal respect is the key to their usefulness. So Tradition 9 reaffirms Tradition 2. So you can't go without one without the other. And that's a hell of a big difference between the short form and the long form. Listen what it says. Universal respect is the key to their usefulness. Please make sure that you have the long form of the traditions. Because in so many cases, especially in Tradition 9, what a difference it makes. Obviously, Tradition 9 reaffirms Tradition 2, and you know what's absolutely amazing about the long form of the Tradition 9? 3 times he uses the word group. 2 times he uses the word groups, plural. And he mentions AA as a whole, so he's covered the whole gamut of Tradition 9 as far as what we're doing with what we do and don't do. Russ, I will get this to you as far as the principles of AA, or the principles of the traditions. The 12 traditions are often referred to as why it works. They ensure the continuance of AA as a whole by providing guidelines for groups to evaluate their activities and actions. In a practical vein, they are individually and collective humility builders for the group. They ask the group to consider its conduct for the broader perspective and, when necessary, give up something for the overall good of AA. The traditions also contain spiritual principles. These principles, when applied in our lives, complement the steps as a guide to personal recovery. And here, obviously, are the principles, spiritual principles of traditions I try to strive in my daily life. Number 9, unless each AA member follows the best of his ability, our suggested 12 steps to recovery, he almost certainly signs his death warrant. His drunkenness and disillusion are not penalties inflicted by people in authority, and they result from his personal disobedience to spiritual principles, spirit of service. Ask and you shall receive, my man. No need for the text. There you go. Thank you for reminding me of that, and lo and behold, it was in today's thing. So, what does that mean in you and I's form? Don't have enough room, but we're going to go ahead and try and do this. Alcoholics Anonymous is bass-ackwards. Everybody knows what that is, right? It's a bad triangle upside down, and I am not dyslexic. That's what this is about. The service structure, it's upside down. In other words, we have an ex-chairman in the room. I think he's still here. When he was the chairman of our intergroup office, he was down at the bottom. The groups are up top. Everybody's complaining about AA. Oh, really? Everybody's complaining about New York. Everybody's complaining about that. My answer is, what does your home group do for your intergroup, your general service rep, your DCM, and so on and so forth, so we can tell them what to do? And almost invariably say, oh, we don't have an intergroup rep. Oh, really? I see. We just did that yesterday, by the way. Another chance for a platform, by the way. Thank you for all veterans that were in here that gave me the honor and privilege to be able to vote in this great country yesterday. I am not a convicted felon, and I take that seriously. My father went to World War II in Korea to give me the right to vote, and that is a right. It's not an obligation, and it is something that I get to do, and there are some veterans in this room. Kenny, Ted, and the other ones that I don't know, thank you for defending their right to where I can be a participant in this great country that we have. Thank you for doing that. That is not an outside issue. That's a statement of where Alcoholics Anonymous was formed and what country it was, the United States of America. Anyhow, invariably going back to that when they're complaining, so what does your group, what did you send down? We meet every month down at St. Thomas. Is this still where we're meeting? What does your group have to say? Well, hell, we don't have an intergroup. Oh, really? Okay, then what does your GSR when they go to Brunswick? Well, we don't have one of those either. Oh, okay. So I get it. So anyhow, the upside triangle is obviously it's upside down. The groups go to the district, the area assembly, to the general service office, and then they go down to the bottom. That's where it is. We're breaking down in that. It's broken so bad. That's why in every April in New York City, or they move it to a suburb, now it's called Ride New York, most don't even know what it is. Don't even know what the general service conference, they don't even know what they're talking about, what they're voting on. And I tell you what, it's life-changing what they're doing. If you want a voice, the only way to get it is to that. You've got people voting on our present and our future on what they think is best, because guess what? The groups in the area and the districts aren't telling them what they think and feel. But everybody's complaining about Alcoholics Anonymous. So anyhow, the upside down triangle, the blessed to become a servant. If you're really blessed, you become a trusted servant. You're not important, the job is, and there are no big shots in AA. A little shot always whips a big shot, and I've found out too, and there's pajamas for any length of sobriety, isn't there? So, now what happens here is where are the AA police when you need them? We've talked about the violations, and we were talking about that before. There are some undercover and some plain clothes, and there might be a chief or whatever. The reason we don't have that is we talked about that in tradition too. And when you go to New York and you say they are doing this or they are doing that, you will get this pat answer that will make you sick to your stomach. It says, our experience suggests. Of course, our experience suggests. Don't violate the traditions, don't do this or whatever. Of course, you're at perfect liberty. You can do anything you want in Alcoholics Anonymous. You can even have a drink. And if there's anything that's going on at any level in the group that is sickness, one of the 41 principles are being violated. In alcoholic arithmetic, it's not. You have 12 steps, 12 traditions, 12 concepts, which is 36. And what are you saying in the other 5? There are warranties, 5 warranties with concept 12. If you don't know what those are, I suggest you get into that as well, because that is the third legacy. Just like this triangle, and when it's turned upside down, and obviously we have that, it's like a 3-legged stool. If you have one leg on that stool and you sit on that, you are going to be on the ground. If you sit on that stool and it has 2 legs, you will still be on the ground. If you're going to sit on that 3-legged stool and it's going to be secure, we must have all 3 legs of that. And we are going to talk a little bit about the service structure, because you can't go in to this tradition without talking about it. And the more that I study these, the more I realize how interwoven, obviously, they all are. That's why we have the triangle. Bill was a master, if you will, when he designed this society. Now, if you want to take a look at this, when these things aren't being followed and the triangle isn't right, you will have this, and then, by the way, this comes out of our 12 traditions here, and I call that the Traditions for Dummies, for myself on there. That's cartoon form. If you'll take a look at this, you can see this looks like a home group meeting where this one guy's hitting the other guy with a think sign, and somebody's choking her out down at the bottom down there. Somebody's biting this one, somebody's pulling the hair over there, and that is a home group meeting talking about what they're going to do for their anniversary. They're deciding if they're going to have Pepsi or Coke for the anniversary. So, yeah, we joke about it, but it's unfortunately the reality of what we've gone to in Alcoholics Anonymous. And we'll see actually what our book talks about, Tradition 9, on page 88. It's pretty cool what he does that, and I offer you this again. Please note the year that he wrote this, August of 1948. Tradition 9, and it goes as this. Page 88, Tradition 9. The least possible organization, that's our universal ideal. Not idea, ideal. Thank you, Russ. We're talking about that. No fees, no dues, no rules imposed on anyone. One alcoholic bringing recovery, not drinking, to the next. That is the substance of what we most desire, isn't it? And damn him, he starts out about the first legacy, recovery, almost always with these traditions. So he takes it from a personal note to the group and Alcoholics Anonymous as a whole in one sentence or one paragraph. He's got me. I cannot debate on what he just said. And what's so cool about that is you can see in Tradition 9, we've covered a whole lot of other traditions with that introduction, and also he's setting the table next week for Tradition 10. How in the hell can he cover all of what we've done before and the next tradition in one paragraph in 1948? Absolutely fascinating again. Anyhow, he goes on to this. But how shall this simple ideal best be realized? So he's given us what we want, and now he's going to propose what we do and what we don't do. He goes on to say this. Often a question that, for example, we find this kind of AA who is for this simplicity, terrified of anything organized. He tells us AA is getting too complicated. He thinks money, tradition 7, only makes trouble. Committees only make decision, tradition 8. See, damn him, okay, isn't that cool? Elections only make politics. Paid workers only professionals, and clubs only coddle slippers. Say he lets get back to coffee and cakes by cozy firesides. If any alcoholics stray our way, we'll look after them, but that's not enough. Simplicity is our answer. Quite opposed to such halcyon simplicity. Don't you love Bill? That's the third time he's used it, and he's going to use it again. Halcyon, if you weren't here, obviously, is calm, peaceful, tranquil, happy, joyful, carefree. Halcyon, that's the word out on the street today, halcyon, okay? And it says, halcyon simplicity is the AA promoter. Left to himself, he would bang the cannon and twang the lyre at every crossroad of the world. Millions for drunks, great AA hospitals, battering of paid organizers, and publicity experts wielding all the latest paraphernalia of sound and script. Such would be a promoter's dream. Yes, sir, he would bark. My 2-year plan calls for 1 million AA members by 1950. Once again, you can see he's doing the left, he's doing the right, or if you're in that other thing, blue state, red state, and he's going to do what he does in the 12 concepts, the word compromise. Once again, we talked about our 2 co-founders, how Dr. Bob and Bill, difference between night and day. They taught us how to disagree agreeably, but they always put principles before, not above personalities. That's another one that gets twisted around in here. Before, not above, because then you're talking about 2 different things. But anyhow, always what was best for Alcoholics Anonymous, always what was best for God, regardless of what they thought, what they wanted individually. It was always what was best for us. It wasn't an I or me or a my thing with Dr. Bob and Bill. It was always a we, us, and ours. Therefore, we have what we have. Anyhow, it goes on to this. For one, I'm glad we have both conservative and enthusiast. They teach us much. Isn't he so PC, politically correct back then, right? The conservative will surely see to that the AA movement never gets overly organized, but the promoter will continue to remind us of our terrific obligation to the newcomer and those hundreds of thousands of alcoholics still waiting all over the world to hear of AA, obviously. He says, we shall naturally take the firm and safe middle course. So the word is compromise, firm and safe. Got it. Okay. AA has always violently resisted the idea of any general organization. Yet paradoxically, we have ever stoutly insisted upon organizing certain special services, mostly of those absolutely necessary to the effective and plentiful 12-step work. And he's talking about what we did last week. Remember, we are the professionals, but we use paid workers to allow us to be the professionals. If, for instance, an AA group elects a secretary or rotating committee, if an area forms an intergroup committee, if we set up a foundation, a general service, or grapevine, then we are organized for service. The AA book and pamphlets, our meeting places and clubs for our dinners and regional assemblies, these are services too. Nor can we secure hospital connections, properly sponsor new prospects, and obtain good public relations just by chance. People have to be appointed to look after these things, sometimes paid people. Special services are performed. But none of these special services have our spiritual or our social activity, the great current of AA, ever been really organized or professionalized. Boy, we talked about that last week. Isn't it beautiful? Now, he goes on to say, yet our recovery program has been enormously aided. While important, these service activities are very small by contrast with our main effort. As such facts and distinctions become clear, we shall easily lay aside our fears of blightly organization or hazardous wealth. As a movement, we shall remain comfortably poor, for our service expenses are trifling. With such assurances, we shall without doubt continue to improve and extend our vital life and death lifelines of special service to better carry our AA message to others, to make sure, or to make for ourselves a finer, greater society, and God willing, to assure Alcoholics Anonymous a long life and perfect unity. That was the other unity that we talked about. Perfect unity. So you can see tradition 9 obviously encompasses tradition 1, and it covers tradition 2, and it covers tradition 7, and covers tradition 8. Without those, we could not have 9. It's absolutely so cool about that. 93, yes. A little bit breakdown on that. 93, where it says tradition 9. It's towards the bottom of the page, tradition 9, page 93. Tradition 9 asks that we give up all, not some, not most, not a lot, not quite a few, all idea of expensive organization. Enough is needed to permit effective, you can have some ineffective, effective work by our special services and no more, period. The tradition breeds democracy. Our leadership is one of service, and it's rotating. Our few titles never clothe their holders with arbitrary personal authority. They hold authorizations to serve, never to govern. How cool is that? Like I said, once again, tradition 9 backs up 2, or 2 backs up 9. And we are all interwoven with that. Let's keep it simple. We're talking about Alcoholics Anonymous. I believe that is bottom of page 303. Let's keep it simple, but how? $1 million question. This grapevine will read as we celebrate AA's 20th anniversary in July, Long Beach, California. We shall be stepping over a new threshold into our future. We shall rejoice as we think of the gifts and the wonders of yesterday. And as we rededicate ourselves to the fulfilling immense promise of AA's tomorrow, we shall certainly survey how we stand today. Have we really kept AA simple, or unwittingly have we blundered? Thinking on this, I began to wonder about our fundamental structure, those principles, relationships, ain't getting away from it, relationships and attitudes, which are the substance of our 3 legacies of recovery, unity, and service. I'm going to stop there for just a minute. Remember that other book that we can't do this book without talking about that blue book. What does he say? Or what was he told? Ideas, attitudes, emotion, the guiding forces of these men were suddenly cast aside, and a completely new set of motives begin to dominate them. Oh, I get that, and look what he just got done writing about that. What he was talking about, obviously, relationships and attitudes. Psychic change, spiritual awakening, spiritual experience. 3 legacies, got to have it to keep the deal going that we get after having had the spiritual awakening as the result. That's just the beginning. It's far from the end. Anyhow, the 3 legacies of recovery, unity, and service. In our 12 steps and 12 traditions, we find 24 definitely stated principles. Our 3rd legacy includes a charter for world service that provides thousands of general service representatives, hundreds of local committee members, 80 general service conference delegates, 15 general service board trustees, together with our headquarters, legal, financial, public relations, editorial experts, and their staffs. Our group and area services add still more to this seeming complexity. 22 years ago, last spring, we were setting up about the formation of a trusteeship for AA as a whole. Up to that moment, we had never stated principles or special services. Our 12 steps weren't even a gleam in the eye. As far as the 12 traditions, well, we only had 40 members and about 3 years experience, so there wasn't be anything traditional about. AA was two small groups, one in Akron, the other in New York, and we were a most intimate family. Dr. Bob and I were its papas. Uh-oh, you got a lot of illegitimate children running around today, don't they? Who's your daddy? Okay, yeah, all right. Yeah. Who is your daddy? I love that anyhow. Where were we? Yes, okay. We're talking about papas, right, okay. And it says, and we said in those days, and what we said in those days went. Home parlors were meeting places. Social life ranged around coffee pots on kitchen tables. Alcoholism was, of course, described as a deadly malady. Woo. I don't know. Are we even talking about that anymore? Deadly malady? Call it a spiritual malady, but I like that deadly. That's a little bit more descriptive. Now, come on, y'all. Here's 5 things, formula for survival and group. Sounds a little bit Oxford to me. Honesty, confession, restitution, working with others, and prayer was the sole formula for survival and growth. I'm going to read that again. Now, damn him. How can we be talking about traditions and now we're talking about growth, individual, and the fellowship? Honesty, confession, restitution, working with others, and prayer was the sole formula for survival and growth. These were uncomplicated years of, there he is, halcyon simplicity. Once again, calm, peaceful, tranquil, happy, joyful, and carefree. There was no need for the maxim, let's keep it simple. We couldn't have been any less complicated. Now, there's 2 sides to every coin, right? Double-edged sword, sweet and sour, good and bad. And here it is. The contrast between then and now is rather breathtaking. To some of us, it's frightening. Therefore, we ask, has AA really kept faith with Dr. Bob's warning? Let's keep it simple. How can we possibly square today's 12 steps, 12 traditions, general service conferences, and AA international conventions with our original coffee and cake AA? For myself, I do not find this too difficult to do. Genuine simplicity, damn him, there he goes again, by clarifying it, not simplicity, genuine, the real deal. Genuine simplicity for today is to be found, I think, in whatever principles, practices, and services can permanently ensure our widespread harmony and effectiveness. Wow. I'm going to read that again. That's worth repeating, huh? Genuine simplicity for today. I think in whatever principles, practices, and services can be permanently ensure our widespread harmony and effectiveness. Oh, I get it. Those are all the traditions that we're talking about up to this point in time. Got it. Okay. Therefore, it has been better to state our principles than to leave them vague. Oh, I get it. Black words, white page, whatever book you're using, that big book. This book, I get it. There is no guesswork. Oh, that's right. We talked about it earlier. Things don't need to be rewritten. They need to be followed. Oh, a novel concept. Oh, that's right. Don't change AA to me. Me change to AA, and then I'll get better. Oh, I'm starting to get it now. Okay. I get it. Okay. Now, I'm thinking what it is. Okay. Now, it says, better to clarify their application than to leave these unclear. Better to organize their services than to leave them the hit or miss methods or none at all. So see, it's the common ground for growth and for effectiveness. Everything that he's talking about, and he's telling us, yes, you can have your cake and eat it too. Doesn't that sound like utopia, huh? Okay, most certainly indeed, a return to the kitchen table area would bring no hope for simplicity. So now he's saying those days are done. Done. It could only mean wholesale irresponsibility, disharmony, and effectiveness. Whoa. Let's picture this. There would be no definite guiding principles, no literature, no meeting halls, no group funds, no planned sponsorship, no stable leadership, no clear relationships with hospitals, no sound public relations, no local services, no world services. Returning that early brand of simplicity would be as absurd as selling the steering wheel, the gas tank, and the tires off of the family car. The card would be simplified, all right. No more gas, repair bills either. But our car wouldn't go anyplace. The family life hardly would be simplified. It would be instantly confused and complicated. Too simple is just that. Too simple and it won't work. Now, it says a formless AA anarchy emanated by, quote, let's get together. Spirit just isn't enough for AAs here and now. What worked fine for 200 members in 1938 won't work more than the 200,000 of them in 1960. Our added size and therefore greater, third pertinent idea, responsibility, okay. Obviously, therefore greater responsibility simply spells the difference between AA's childhood and its coming of age. We have seen the folly of attempting to recapture the childhood variety of simplicity in order to sidestep the kind of, there he is again, responsibility that must always, not some, not most, not a lot, not quite a few, must always, that's double whammy, must always be faced to keep it simple for today. We cannot possibly turn back the clock and shouldn't try. The history of our changing ideas about simplicity for today is fascinating. See, he used the word I didn't. Okay. So you can, all you guys that are counting those, that don't count. For example, the time came when we actually had to codify or organize, if you please, the basic principles that emerged out of our experience. Oh, that's right. Those were the 12 steps in the big book. Oh, that's right. The 12 traditions. Oh, that's right, the 12 concepts. I'm starting to see it now. Experience, history, it happened, undebatable. Follow it. No interpretation, no guesswork. It goes on to say there was a lot of resistance to this. It was stoutly claimed by many that our then simple, but rather garbled word-of-mouth recovery program was being made too complicated by the publication of AA's 12 steps. We were throwing out simplicity out the window, it was said. But that was not so. One only has to ask, where would AA be today without its 12 steps? Well, you can probably go to a lot of meetings and see what that is. Okay, sorry, couldn't help myself. That was just too easy. Okay, anyhow. That these principles were carefully defined and published in 1939 has done only the Lord knows how much good. Codification has vastly simplified our task. Who could contest that now? In 1945, a similar outcry arose when the sound principles of living and working together, sounds like he's talking about the 12 traditions, were clearly outlined in AA's 12 traditions. Once again, we're going to read that again. This is what we've been doing from September till now, is sound principles of living and working together clearly outlined in the 12 traditions. Beautiful. It was then anything but simple to get agreement about them. Yet who can say that our AA lives have been complicated by the traditions? On contrary, these sharply defined principles, have immensely simplified the task of maintaining unity. Wow, so that's what it is. That's what the 12 traditions are, okay? They are sharply defined principles immensely simplify the task of maintaining unity. So if we ain't got it, then guess what? We ain't following them. And it says, and unity for us AAs is a matter of life and death. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for keeping me alive tonight with these 12 traditions. Matter of life and death. Don't you just love it, man? It is just, like I said, there's no guesswork. I'm really getting it now. So, obviously, all the traditions lead to unity. Start with tradition 1 and then end with tradition 12, just like the steps. 12 defined principles. The 12 traditions equal unity or life or death. Okay. Now it goes on to say, the identical thing has everywhere happened in our active services, primarily in World Services. When our first trustee for AA was created, there were some grave misgivings. The alarm was great because this operation involved a certain amount of legality, authority, money, and transaction of some business. We had been running happily about saying that AA had completely separated the spiritual from the material. It was therefore a shocker when Dr. Bob and I proposed World Services, when we urged that these had to head up in some kind of permanent board, and further stated the time has come, at least in this realm, when we would learn how to make material things serve spiritual ends. Got it. Somebody with experience had to be at the steering wheel, and there had to be gas in the AA tank. As our trustees and their co-workers began to carry our message worldwide, our fears slowly evaporated. AA had not been confused, it had been simplified. You could ask any tens of thousands of alcoholics and their families who were coming into AA because of our World Services. Certainly their lives had to be simplified, and in reality, so had ours. When our first General Service Conference met in 1951, come on, y'all, that's probably older than most of you in this room. 1951, get a calculator. How old is that? 62, that's 67 years, is that where we're at? Wow. I hate when that happens, 67, okay. That sounds like an age to retire for Social Security kicking in for some, right? Okay, right, that's, yeah. And it goes on to say, we drew a long breath. For some, this event spilled sheer disaster. Wholesale brawling and politicking would be the rule. Our worst traits would be out front. The serenity of the trustees and everybody else would be disturbed, as indeed it sometimes was. Our beautiful spirituality and AA therapy would be interfered with. People would get drunk over this, and indeed a few did. As never before, the shout went up, "For God's sake, let's keep this thing simple," cried the members. Why can't Dr. Bob and Bill and the trustees go right on running these services for us? That's the only way to keep it simple. Here's how it happened. There's always a story behind the story, motive behind the motive, and reason behind the reason. This is why we had to do what we had to do, or they did what they had to do. Few knew that Dr. Bob was mortally sick. He was dying and he knew it, and that was unbeknownst to a lot of us. Dr. Bob and his dying gave us two great things. He gave us the 12 traditions, or was a mitigating factor in the approval of them, and also in the service conference. A lot of people don't know that, and that was one of his greatest gifts to us before he died. With only 15 years of recovery. Only, right? That was a long time back then. Anyhow, it goes on to this. Nobody stopped to think that there would be soon less of a handful of old-timers left, that soon they would be gone too. The trustees would be quite isolated and unconnected with the fellowship they served. The first big gale would well blow them over. AA would suffer heart failure at its vital center. Irreversible collapse would be the almost certain results. Therefore, we A's had to make a choice. Who would be, what would really be the simpler? Would we get that General Service Conference together despite its special expense or perils? Or will we sit on our hands at home waiting for the fateful consequences of our fear and folly? What in the long run we wondered would be better, therefore simpler. Our history shows we took action. The General Service Conference of Alcoholics Anonymous has just held its 10th annual meeting. Beyond doubt, we know that this is an indispensable instrument, has cemented our unity, has ensured the recovery of the increasing host of sufferers still to come. Therefore, I think we have kept the faith, as I see it, as how we made AA truly simple. Some may still ask, we are nevertheless moving away from our early tradition that AA as such ought never be organized. Not a bit of it. We shall never be organized until we create a government, until we say who shall be members and who shall not, until we authorize our boards and service committees to met out penalties for nonconformity, for non-payment of money, and for misbehavior. I know that every heart shares in this conviction that none of these things can ever happen. So you can see that obviously how we have tradition 9 is by following all the traditions before this. And when we follow tradition 9, it will keep us from what happened to the Washingtonians that we will talk about in depth next week for tradition 10. How cool is that, that tradition 9 is the lifeblood to keep Alcoholics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous. And it goes on to this. It says, we merely organize our principles so that they can be better understood. Okay. And we continue to so organize our services that AA's lifeblood can be transfused into those who must otherwise die. This is the all in all of AA's organization. There can never be any more than this. Thank God. Because once again, you and I are the professionals. They are allowing us from the very top to the bottom, from the very bottom to the top, for us to be the professionals. A concluding query, has the era of coffee and cake, the fast friendships, vanished from the AA scene because we are now going modern? Well, scarcely in my hometown. I know an AA who has been sober several years. He goes to a small meeting. The talks he hears there are just like those Dr. Bob and I used to hear and also make in our respective front parlors. As neighbors, my friend have a dozen AA cronies. He sees them constantly over kitchen tables and coffee cups. He takes a frequent whack at 12-step cases. For him, nothing has changed. It's just like AA always was. At meetings, my friend may see some books, pamphlets, and grapevines on the table. He hears the lady secretary make her timid announcement that these are for sale. He thinks the New York intergroup is a good thing because some of his fellow members were sponsored through it. On world services, he's not so clear. He hears some pros and cons about them, but he concludes they are probably needed. He knows his group sends in some money for these undertakings and that this is okay. Besides, his group's hall rent has to be paid, so when the hat comes by, he cheerfully drops $1 into it. As far as my friend is concerned, these modernizations of AA is not a big shattering to his serenity or to his pocketbook. They merely represent his responsibility, damn it, to his group, there he is again, that R word, his area, and to AA as a whole. It has never occurred to him that these are but most obvious obligations. If you try to tell my friend that AA is spoiled by money, politics, and organization, he would just laugh. He'd probably say, why don't you come over to my house after the meeting and we'll have another cup of coffee. So a beautiful way of describing what we have. What are the services? Page 161 and 162. What are the services? Top of page 161, he says, services include meeting places, clubs, hospitals, intergroup offices. They mean pamphlets, books, and good publicity of almost every description. They require committees, delegates, trustees, and conferences. And not to be forgotten, they need voluntary money contribution. These services, whether performed by individual, groups, areas, or AA as a whole, are utterly vital, life and death, to our existence and growth, nor can we make AA simple by abolishing such services. We would only be asking for complication and confusion. Obviously, he goes on to say, concerning any given service, we therefore pose but one question. Is this service really needed? If it is, then maintain it we must, or fail our mission in those who seek AA. The most vital, life and death, yet the least understood, group of services that AA has is which enables us to function as a whole, namely AA, General Service Office, the Publishing Incorporated, the Grapevine Incorporated, Board of Trustees recently renamed the General Service Board of Alcoholics Anonymous. Our worldwide unity and much of our growth since early times is directly traceable to this cluster of life-giving activities located since 1938 in New York. He goes on to say, until 1950, these overall services were the sole function of a few old-time AAs, several non-alcoholic friends, Dr. Bob and myself. For all the years of the AA infancy, we old-timers had been self-appointed trustees of Alcoholics Anonymous. At last, we realized AA had grown up and that our fellowship was ready and able to take these responsibilities from us. They were also another urgent reason for change. Since we old-timers couldn't live forever, newer trustees would be virtually unknown to the AA groups, now spread over the whole earth. Without direct linkage to AA, future trustees couldn't possibly function alone. That meant we had to form a conference representing our membership that we could meet yearly with the trustees in New York and thus assume more direct responsibility for the guardianship of AA tradition and the direction of the principal service affairs. Otherwise, a virtual unknown board of trustees and too little understood service headquarters operations would someday be bound to face collapse. Suppose acting quite on their own that future trustees were to make a serious blunder. Suppose there was no linkage to AA, that they tried to act for us in great troubles or crises with no direct guidance to AA as a whole. How could they do this? Remember I was talking about the upside triangle? He's talking about let's have our voice be heard. They can't know what to do if we ain't telling them and how we start, and it starts at the group level. Your voice counts, but it only counts if we follow the service structure that we have. If not, then no voice, no complaint. You can't say anything about Alcoholics Anonymous. It goes on to say, with no direct guidance from AA as a whole, how could they do this? Collapse of our top services then would be inevitable, and if under such conditions our world services did fall apart, how could they ever be constructive? The trustees, Dr. Bob and I, finally saw in 1950 this appalling risk must no longer be taken. A direct linkage between ourselves and AA had to be built. These were the conclusions that led to the formation of the General Service Conference of Alcoholics Anonymous, a body of 75 elected delegates from states of Providence, the United States, and Canada. On a trial and experimental basis, these delegates commenced in 1951 to sit yearly at New York with our trustees and General Service staff members. The General Service Conference of Alcoholics Anonymous have proved itself an immense success. Its record of achievement during the 4-year trial period has been completely convincing. Therefore, we are the old-timers of AA now, are ready to deliver the principle, and that's P-A-L, not P-L-E, affairs of Alcoholics Anonymous into permanent keeping of this well-tried and trusted body of AA members. Beginning, therefore, with our 20th anniversary in 1955, the third legacy of world services will henceforth be for all, not some, not most, not a lot, not quite a few, members of Alcoholics Anonymous to have and to hold. Sounds like you're getting married, good times and bad, for so long as God. He always takes us back to that unflattering point of departure. It ain't yours, it's God's. God may wish our society to endure. So now we know with the service structure why we have the conference or the third legacy. Cannot talk about Tradition 9 without doing that. Last and closing article tonight is to serve is to live. Page 129 and 130. So, let's see what he says about this. To serve is to live, or is to serve is to love? I'd say it's both. And by the way, if you want to get even with somebody, love them. If you really want to get even with them, pray for them. And the reason that works is they need the prayers and we need the practice. So anyhow, it says to serve is to live. Our first General Service Conference of Alcoholics Anonymous gathered in New York City in April 1951. It was composed of 37 U.S. and Canadian delegates plus AA's General Service Headquarters staff of trustees. The single of this purpose of this conference was to serve AA throughout the world. This unexciting statement now carries a deep, full meaning for all who was there. Not some, not most, not a lot, not quite a few, for all who was there. We came to believe that AA's future had been made secure. We became certain that AA could live for so long as God might need us. Keeps going back to there. God's pulling the strings. But you got to remember that other book says that's non-conference approved, but we always go back to it. It said this whole mess, talking about earth and the heaven and the stars and all that, was created in 6 days. On the seventh day, he took a rest. That's called the Sabbath, or we know it as Sunday. You know that damn book, and I've read that a couple times too, that big book from cover to cover. If you want, that's quite an order to do that. I have not found where he ever went back to work. He did all that work in 6 days, and he hasn't come back since. So if anything's going to be done down here, that means who he made in likeness and image, that's your job and my job to do now. So that's what he's talking about, work. It goes on to say this. It says, why did each witness of the conference feel so deeply about it? I think for two reasons. The group consciousness of Alcoholics Anonymous, Tradition 2, was heard to speak for the first time. Powerful, powerful, powerful. And we realized, as it never did before, how perilous faith without works might really become. How many times does he say that in the big book? 6 times. So now it's important, if it's worth that big book 6 times, faith without works is dead. And that came from that other book that I just talked about, by the way, in James, if you're into that. That's where that came from. It says, so that it was that AA's group conscience heard its first call to service, first high call to service. So that's what the informed group conscience, a loving God is. I get it. Service to Alcoholics Anonymous and to God. With that being said, there is no I, me, or my in an informed group conscience. It's the language of we, us, and ours, following the first tradition, this thing called unity. It's all starting to come in. It's all getting tied up. All the loose ends are coming together. So now he goes on to say this. Making this plainer, let's look for a moment at a single AA member. Faith alone does not save him. Okay. He has to act, do something. Oh, God, that is a responsibility. I get it. Okay. He has to do something. He must, not should, could, ought to, carry his message to others, practice AA's principles in all his affairs. If he doesn't, here's what it is. Else he slips, he withers, and he dies. Oh, it's a matter of life and death. Yes, faith without works is dead for the individual and for Alcoholics Anonymous as a whole. All the way up and all the way down. No, nothing or nobody's exempt. Look now at an AA group. Can pure faith, mere belief in the right principle and sound tradition make the group a going concern? Not in the least. Each AA group as such must, not should, could, ought to, also function, do something. It must serve an appointed purpose or it too withers and fall apart. Oh, okay. It's not my purpose, it's the group's purpose. Oh, that's what all the other traditions are. Singleness of purpose, primary purpose, all the things that we do and don't do in the other traditions. Getting it? It says, now, our conference delegates were able to apply this principle to AA as a whole. If not, then guess what? The individual group and AA as a whole going to die, okay? And it says, the delegates could see far beyond the single AA and his particular group. In a flash, they took in the stark fact that AA as a whole must, not should, not could, not ought to, continue to function or else might well suffer that common penalty of faith without works, which is disintegration. So I'm getting it now, okay. Gone was the comfortable illusion that should each AA group tend strictly to its own affairs, God would then reward them our short-sightedness by guarding AA as a whole entity or as a whole entirely by himself, including our headquarters. AA's public relations, there he is again with relations, and the welfare of the millions who still don't know. The delegates saw that this would spell faith without work and without responsibility. Damn it, there he is again. That could never be. Of course, much work would always have to be done. Not should, not could, not ought to. Have to be done. So who's going to do that? Yeah, we'll just let everybody else do it and I won't do nothing, okay? And it says, much responsibility would have to be taken by many, not by a few. To AA as a whole, each member would need to give a little. Of age now, our fellowship would have to begin looking after its own vital services. These couldn't be thoughtlessly left in the sole custody of our isolated, unknown, unsupported Board of Trustees. The work of our foundation and AA's GHQ, General Headquarters, would have to become widely understood and directly backed up by AA itself. Nothing plainer, thought the delegates, when therefore you see the local conference members, you may find him talking something like this. Thank you for sending me to New York. I have spent 3 days at AA's World Headquarters. Our trustees, general service, grapevine people turned the place inside out so we delegates might vision its past, present, and future. We saw and felt what we saw and felt was startling. Very suddenly, we got the feeling of AA as a whole. We looked up upon the fellowship of surpassing unity. Uh-oh, there it is, surpassing unity. We got another one. I'd say that unity is a pretty important thing, wouldn't you say? Okay. Surpassing unity, one which the sun never sets. A world communication, oh, there he is again with that C word, 4,000 times larger than a single A group. We then realized that this wonder had been made possible by devoted service of a few, those headquarters workers whose decade and more of labor has enabled us in distant fields to garner the great harvest of the 120,000 fellow sufferers into safety of our fold and into the affectionate respect of the whole world.